I am preaching the second and last sermon in a series on the courage of Christmas this year. Have a courageous Christmas. Last week we talked about Zephaniah, the prophet that we read oftentimes in the Advent season, and how the prophet called the people as they waited for the coming of Christ to be courageous, to make courageous decisions, to do courageous waiting. Today we'll read about Mary. We turn to the New Testament and we discover that Christmas didn't happen without people making courageous decisions. And so, by the way, before I say anything else, courageous decisions, alternative Christmas, you've been very generous the last week. We encourage you, lots of wonderful opportunities there and other things going on in the life of the church. So let's turn now to the Gospel of Luke, the first chapter, beginning with verse 26. I honestly think that this section is one of the most important stories about faith in the entire Bible. To me, it is reminiscent of the courage that you find when God, that first story of faith in the 12th chapter of Genesis, where God goes to Abram and Sarah and says, I want you to pick up everything and follow me. This is the kind of all-out faith commitment Mary makes in this story. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and he came to her and he said, Greetings, favored one. The rest of this story, if you read this with sensitivity, the rest of this story will cause you to think about what it means to be called by God, favored one, because it isn't all good news or easy. But he says, Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you. But she was much perplexed by his words and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. The angel said to her, Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And now you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give to him the throne of his ancestor David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Mary said to the angel, How can this be, since I am a virgin? The angel said to her, The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be holy. He will be called Son of God. And now your relative Elizabeth in her old age has also conceived a son, and this is the 6th month for her who was said to be barren. For nothing will be impossible with God. And then Mary said, and this is a line you should remember forever. Then Mary said, Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word. And the angel departed from her. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. We often talk about this time of the year as being a kind of magical time of the year, a magical season. And indeed it is. I mean, if you'll be here tonight, it will seem magical to you. The songs of Christmas, you'll see little children, eyes wide, lit up. Go to the mall or someplace. I mean, all you have to do is be tuned in to what is taking place, especially if you're around young children, and you'll understand that this is a kind of magical season of the year. Another word I oftentimes find myself using at this time of the year is the word mystery. We see that manger scene. We see Mary and Joseph and the baby and the shepherds. We see that in our mind on Christmas Eve. And there really is a kind of mystery to this. God coming into the world to be with us forever. Matthew says he will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us now and always. There is a remarkable kind of mystery, and the older I grow, the more I know that I really don't understand very much about a God who is so much bigger than we are, so much bigger than we can understand. And so that word mystery is a powerful reality in the lives of those of us who claim faith. And yet, this year I started reading through the Christmas stories, Matthew and Luke especially, and it's amazing, they give us what I call the backstory of Christmas. I mean, there are these moments that we celebrate where we have the coming of God into the world and angels singing in the skies and all of that. But when you look at the backstory, it is full of remarkable details about very specific decisions made by very gritty and courageous individuals. And you just have to arrive at the conclusion that without these individuals making very courageous and gritty decisions, Christmas wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't be here today. And so this morning, we just take a look at Mary, who's probably the best example of these kinds of decisions. Luke tells us that an angel comes to Mary. The angel, and Mary, as you know, is a virgin, probably 14 or 15 years old. She was engaged to a man named Joseph, probably a good deal older than she, maybe in his 20s or 30s. And I'm sure that Mary, like any young bride-to-be, was full of anticipation and hopes and dreams. She was looking forward to a wonderful wedding, great rehearsal dinner maybe, then the wedding, a wonderful reception, honeymoon. She and Joseph, surely, like every young couple, had kind of planned out their lives, plotted it stage by stage. 2 children, going to send them to good schools. Maybe they'll go to an Ivy League. They'll be able to take care of us in our old age. And all of a sudden, in one moment, it all blows up. The angel Gabriel comes to her and says to her, "Blessed are you, Mary. God has found favor with you." She says, "What kind of favor is this?" He says, "You're going to be pregnant. You're going to be pregnant with the Son of God. Blessed are you. God has found favor with you." And one of the most amazing responses in all of the Bible, in fact, in all of history, she turns to the angel Gabriel with full understanding, I think, full understanding of what is taking place in her life. And she says, "Let it be with me according to God's will. Let it be with me. I give everything. I give everything. I give my present. I give my son. I give my marriage. I give my life. I give my future. I give everything to God." And I think what is important to understand about this when we talk about the gritty decisions, individual decisions that are made, is that she surely did this against every authority figure in her life. Moses doesn't give us all these details, but you can figure this out. She goes to her mother, and maybe she puts on a happy face. She says, "Guess what, Mom? I've been visited by the angel Gabriel. He tells me I'm pregnant. I'm going to be pregnant. And it's not Joseph's son either." You know what her mother would have said, what any mother would have said. "Mary, have you lost your mind? Don't do it. Don't do it." So she goes to her father. Her father is older and wise. She says, "Father, guess what has happened to me? I have found favor with God. I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant with the Son of God. Joseph isn't the father." And her father says, "Mary, don't do it." You can go ahead and play this out in your mind if you want to. She goes down to the synagogue, finds the rabbi. He'd been her rabbi all of her life. Surely he will understand. She says, "Rabbi, guess what has happened?" He says, "Mary, don't do it." If that's what it means to give your life to God, don't do it. I think you can figure out how difficult this decision might have been for her if you kind of make it very, very personal. It doesn't even have to be something as wild as having a baby. I mean, this year when I was reading this, I thought about all the dumb decisions that I have made in my life, the dumb ideas I've had. And so I just kind of played it out like this. One Tuesday morning, I have a great idea. It's a great idea, and I go and meet with the senior staff. We all gather around the table as we do at 9 o'clock. Every Tuesday morning, I say, "Here's a great idea." And I tell them what it is, and I look up, and they're just staring at me, blank looks on their faces. They said, "Are you crazy? Don't do it." But I'm convinced, I'm committed. That night, I go home, I tell my wife, I say, "Bob's," her name's Bobby, I call her Bob's. I said, "Bob's, I've got this great idea. I know you're going to love this idea. This is what we're going to do." And she says, "Don, no. Still convinced, I go the next morning to my bishop, Bishop's office is right down the street, south on Coit, not far from here. I guess that's both a kind of a blessing and a curse. I don't know. I go to my bishop and I say, guess what, Bishop? Here's a great idea I've got this is what we're going to do at Christ Church. And he looks at me and he says, Don, you have had so many goofy, crazy ideas through the years. And one or two of them have actually worked. But this is the dumbest idea you've ever had. I'm telling you, whatever you do, don't do it. Don't you know that that's the kind of advice Mary got? And she looks at the angel Gabriel and says, here I am. Let it be with me according to God's will. It's one of the great statements you'll find throughout all the Bible. No wonder the Roman Catholics revere her. They got it right. Mary, Mother of God. The older I have grown, the less confidence I have in trying to seek out the truth about faith. The facts of faith. Is this right, this wrong? Trying to get the creeds exactly right. But the more committed I am to the fact that faith is a matter of making commitments. It's a matter of making deep and lasting commitments. That's what Mary did. A couple of weeks ago, out here after one of the services, a friend of mine, a member of the church, came by and she said, Don, I know that you admire David Brooks. And she said, he's going to be on TV. Oprah Winfrey is going to interview him, an hour interview. And I thought you might want to know about that and go and record it and be sure and watch it. David Brooks is a columnist for the New York Times. He's Jewish, an intellectual, a New York intellectual in the truest sense of the word, Ivy League educated, one of the brightest men in America, I think. About a year ago, he published a book called The Road to Character. And I read the book, and so I was eager to see this. I went home and recorded it, and a few days later, I watched the interview. And the first thing that Oprah asked David Brooks is, she says, David, why did you write this book? And the answer he gave her is the one he's got in the book. He said, honestly, I wrote this book to save my own soul. He said about 5 years ago, I started kind of surveying my own life. And this is the conclusion to which I came. He said, I came to the conclusion that I have built up a number of what I call resume virtues in life. I've got a good education. I've got a good degree. I have a good job. I write a column that comes out twice in the New York Times every week. I've written some books. I appear regularly on national television. I'm sought after as a speaker, as a consultant. He said, I realize that I have a number of what I call resume virtues. They have to do with my own life, my professional life, but that I was missing what I call eulogy virtues. The kind of things you'd like to be said about you when you die. He said, when I looked honestly at my life, it seemed that it was in many ways an empty and vacuous life, and that I had developed a very narcissistic approach to the rest of the world. And so he said, I really set out to save my own soul. He's an amazing researcher, and he's the first book he picked up was St. Augustine's Confessions. And he started reading St. Augustine, and then he moved on. He kept finding different people throughout history that he thought were people of remarkable commitment and character. And so the book is really a series of mini biographies about very different people, different faiths, different people, and the commitments that they made, and the way in which they grew their lives in terms of deep commitment and character. At the end of the interview, she asked him this question. She said, what would you like for people to say about you at the time of your death? And he hesitated for just a moment, and then he said this. Real character is about the commitments that we make. Deep and lasting commitments. It can be to a number of different things. It can be to a God or to a faith. It can be to a philosophy or a way of life. It can be to a vision or a goal. But it has to be to something that is bigger than you are, something that will outlive you. And he said, I hope people will say about me that I was a person of deep commitments. That's what we see in this story with Mary, isn't it? At this remarkably young age, she makes this deep commitment. She turns to God and she says, wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever you ask, I will follow. Let it be with me according to your will. Mary, Mother of God. We live in a very unique moment, I think, in terms of our communal life here in America and around the world, and especially in America. We've talked about this a lot, the religious landscape in which we live. We talk on staff every week, it seems like, about the research that tells us that people are moving further and further away from the church, oftentimes further away from faith in the way that we define it. And you know this category, it's just an exploding category of people who say, I'm spiritual but not religious. And I started thinking about that in terms of the text we're looking at today. I'm spiritual but not religious. I've been asked this question, is it possible to be spiritual but not religious? For me, that's an easy answer. Of course it is. Of course it is. If by that you mean I'm spiritual but I'm not committed to a particular religious institutions, all of our religious institutions are human. They're run by human beings, and so they're have their faults, they're sinful, there are times they're sinful. I understand. I don't want to be a part of a human institution that is about religion. So can you be spiritual without being religious in that way? Of course you can. The truth of the matter is you can't be anything but spiritual. You see, I believe that. I believe we're all spiritual. God made us to be spiritual. That old kind of cliche saying about we're not bodies with spiritual dimensions, but we're spirits with a body attached. I believe that's true. And so can you be up on a mountain early in the morning and watch the sun rise in the east and say, wow, I experienced the presence of God. What a holy moment this is. My spirituality, I experience it. Or can you be on the lake when the sun goes down and have that same kind of experience? I believe you can be on the golf course. I really do. If you kind of, shut out all the language that you'll hear on the golf course, you can have a spiritual moment on the golf course. Any person can stop right where they are in your car in the middle of a traffic jam and say a prayer. I think there are all sorts of people who, in that sense, are spiritual but not religious. But let me tell you this. If a person means by saying, I'm spiritual but not religious, if they mean by that, I'm just want to be spiritual when I want to be spiritual. I like it when I can choose to have a spiritual moment now and then. Just last week, I was driving in my automobile and I had a spiritual moment. I thought, I prayed for the refugees. And a couple of days ago, I was driving down the access road, the toll road, right there at Parker and the toll road. And there was a homeless man out there with a sign, cardboard and crayon. He was wanting money. I pulled in my pocket. I gave him $4. I had 4 pockets. It was really a spiritual moment for me. And by the way, next week, I think I'm going to spend a couple of hours working in a soup kitchen, because that seems like a spiritual thing to me. And a few weeks ago, I found this very cool website. Crowdfunding. People are digging water wells in Africa. I gave a little money to that website. If being spiritual but not religious means that you can just kind of dance around from one moment to the next, from one cause to the next, from one prayer to the other, you may be able to be spiritual but not religious, but it is going to be a deeply, deeply unsatisfying spirituality. Because you see, as human beings, we are hardwired for deep and strong and lasting commitments. I fear that some people use that spiritual but not religious phrase to avoid the kind of strong commitments to which God calls us. Mary, Mother of God, it would have been so easy for her to say, "Thank you, Gabriel, for this little visit. Someday I will commit. Someday I will make a full commitment. Not today." She said, "Whatever it is God wants of me, I'm in all the way." And for that reason, you and I are here today in, hopefully, all the way. There are a lot of things we do to try to make it a really Merry Christmas, and they're really wonderful things. I don't have a problem with any of them. We go shop for our kids and our grandkids and our spouses. We put up trees and lights. We decorate our homes. We have parties. We cook food. We gather together. There are a lot of things that we do to make sure that Christmas will happen this year. But if I might be so bold, let me suggest that the quality of your Christmas this year, the quality of my Christmas this year, will reflect the quality and the depth and the courage of the commitments we make.